Shalom. Welcome to this week's Dvar Torah on Sedra Vayeshev. We're going to discuss something very interesting: forgetfulness. If you have chronic bouts of forgetfulness, it could be your anxiety that causes the mental miscues. This is because stress, fear, and even depression can cause memory loss. Too much stress over long periods of time can hinder brain function in a major way. One of the reasons for this is that when you become stressed, your body releases a hormone called cortisol. This hormone affects your ability to remember. In this dvar Torah, I'd like to discuss forgetfulness. Forgetfulness is sometimes referred to as a blessing, for if all of our memories collected together, we'd never be able to handle the trauma. Just think about some of the horrible moments in our lives that we'd like to forget. Yet, we are a people that places a great deal of intelligence and knowledge, a great deal of weight on intelligence and knowledge. Forgetfulness is the bane of the Jew, nothing less than sin. A lesser-known homiletic lesson from our sages about Yosef's pit will demonstrate our idea of forgetfulness. I hope this dvar Torah warns the pitfalls, no pun intended, of forgetfulness. Torah study is the greatest mitzvah we have, and the one in which we must put the most effort into. It isn't the acquisition of knowledge that we strive for, but rather the perfection that comes with Torah study. It refines our minds, perfects our souls, and helps us understand our Creator. Forgetfulness isn't the problem itself, but it becomes a handicap towards further study. Due to the impediment that forgetting places in front of Torah study, Rabbi Meir in Pirkei Avos blames one who doesn't put sufficient effort into remembering what he studied. And I quote, "He who forgets one word of his study, Hashem holds him liable for his life." The Mishnah asks, could blame really be laid on a person if it was simply too hard for him to remember? Rather, Rabbi Meir answers, a person is not guilty unless he deliberately forgets what he studies, meaning he doesn't put enough effort into reviewing. Yosef's brothers assault their brother, and as Hashem records, they took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. Rashi famously asked the question, if the pit was empty, wouldn't I already know that there was no water in it? Rather, Rashi explains, there was no water. That phrase comes to teach us that while there was no water in it, there were snakes and scorpions in it. But our Medrash gives us a homiletic explanation towards that same question. What is there was no water in it? It means there was no water in the pit, and water means Torah. Due to his pain of being in this pit and his fear, Yosef forgot his Torah learning. Now, I have a question. After being abused by his brothers, thrown in a pit towards an unsure future, is Yosef really expected at this moment while sitting in the pit to remember his Torah learning? Clearly, the Medrash's answer is a resounding yes. Torah study isn't about amassed knowledge, but about perfecting the person. Yosef couldn't extricate himself from the situation that he was in, nor from the pit, because he couldn't resolve his issues with his brothers. His fear prevented him from accessing his intelligence and that he refined through Torah study. It wasn't that Yosef was supposed to give a dvar Torah review his Gemara learning at that point, but the knowledge, the intelligence that he had acquired from all of his Torah study should have helped him in this situation. Our sages weren't aiming to explain an extraneous phrase in the Torah. Rather, they used this phrase to teach a homiletic lesson about Torah knowledge and its ability to help in all areas of life. This episode of Yosef being thrown in the pit and being unable to help himself teaches us about the immeasurable benefits from Torah study. It's not just what we get from the study hall, but rather, Torah study helps us in all areas of life. Shabbat Shalom.